We're at a unique moment in US-China relations. Trump just initiated his second trade war in his second term, and as the United States and China sleepily move into a Cold War, I think it's worthy of just taking a moment and figuring out how we got to this place. There's a bipartisan consensus at the moment about how we deal with China. We went from a place of strategic competition to adversarial relationship. And so it's worth taking a moment to figure out how we got here. I've been studying this and U.S.-China relations from the early 2000s till now. So let's talk through it. In 2001, China joins the WTO. The U.S. bet big that economic integration would liberalize China, and both parties thought that would align China with the West, that capitalism and open markets, free markets, would bring openness and peace between the United States and Europe and the West with China. The outcome was not that. The outcome was massive offshoring of U.S. manufacturing, China leveraging the WTO and access of global markets without reforming politically, massive trade deficits exploding, and millions of United States jobs, especially blue-collar, working-class jobs, disappearing, particularly in the Midwest and the Rust Belt. In 2008, the financial crisis makes China creates this impression in Beijing that authoritarian capitalism is a superior model to free markets and free societies. The Chinese host the 2008 Olympics. It's their coming out party, and it's a success. And China uses that as a launching pad towards a global dominance economically. From 2010 to 2015, the Chinese assertiveness grows. They begin to subsidize key industries and undercut global markets, especially in industries that they see as needed for the future, like solar panels. Beijing begins to militarize in the South China Sea and accelerates its International Belt and Road Initiative, and their firms begin their rampant intellectual property theft. The U.S.'s reaction during this era, this is in the second Obama term, Obama pivots to Asia diplomatically, but economically the ties continue to deepen. We have the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is meant to counterbalance China economically, but it dies due to bipartisan opposition, and we start to see that opposition to China starts to grow. Then we have the election of Donald Trump in 2016. Trump runs on a anti-China, anti-globalist platform. He breaks with the traditional Republican orthodoxy about free trade and says that we've been ripped off for decades. Once elected, he introduces tariffs as a blunt weapon to counter the Chinese trade abuses and starts to reform the debate. Now, Democrats, even though they are skeptical of Trump's tactics, start to shift too. Labor-aligned Democrats like Senator Brown of Ohio or Senator Warren of Massachusetts, they've been long warning about China's abuses and concern about fair trade practices and the labor movement here in the U.S., so they begin to shift as well. This is when the bipartisan consensus that we see today really starts to crystallize. Not because everyone agrees how to do it, but that we don't just have a competitor or a fair competitor, but someone who's taking advantage of a situation. Then, towards the end of the Trump term, we have the global pandemic, and that accelerates the deterioration of the relationship between the United States and China. The U.S. does not like how China has handled the Wuhan lab and the Wuhan virus. Trump blames China. We have a lot of domestic anti-China sentiment here in the U.S. So economically, supply chains are disrupted. And Americans, American consumers, American businesses start to really realize how hooked on cheap Chinese goods we are and how vulnerable our supply chains are to China, who's not a friend. And so that really starts to harden our consensus against China. In the Biden tenure, Biden continues Trump's anti-China posture. He maintains Trump's tariffs. He blacklists Chinese tech firms like Huawei and ZTE. He passes the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act, which restricts semiconductor exports and tries to reshore the semiconductor industry. He boosts industrial policy. That is his industrial policy is all about boosting domestic reshoring of manufacturing. The big difference between Biden and Trump on China is not necessarily in objective, but just in method. Trump prefers the blunt tariffs and the harsh rhetoric, but Biden really feels like confrontation is necessary too, and maintains Trump's posture. So as Trump gets elected for a second term, and as we think towards the future, Trump has began his second trade war, and then due to global markets has rescinded some of the tariffs. But I would imagine the tariffs are going to be a huge part of this term in terms of U.S.-China relations. What really remains unsettled is not the core objective. I think the early 2000s rose-colored glasses of a China that has just entered the WTO and China is going to reform politically and Chinese and the Communist Chinese Party is going to be an ally of ours. That ship has gone. I think at this point it is clear that Xi Jinping is the dictator for life or for a very long time. And what remains unsettled is how we compete. We have the Trump hardcore tariff maximalists. We have the strategic decouplers, a lot of Democrats and mainstream Republicans. And then we have the selective engagers, a lot of Democrats and more independent-minded thinkers who are thinking we should be engaging on certain aspects. But what is clear is that we are entering an era of strategic competition. The relationship with China is far more adversarial. The question is whether we are going to blindly and easily sleepwalk into a Cold War with China, or if we can maintain this place of strategic competition without conflict.